And just like that, PNS 2025 has come and gone. And I've already made 2 videos about this, specifically looking at those 2 days where we had the legendary 83s and 93s. But this is going to be my full recap video, so my takeaways from the entire championships. We'll be focusing on the weight classes / lifters that I haven't already talked about in my previous videos. So let's get into it. Number 1, this is the greatest powerlifting meet I've ever seen. I think it's the greatest ever. We saw upsets, we saw records fall, national records, unofficial world records. There were heaps of storylines. We had returning legends, we had young up-and-comers. We had all-time great performances that would go down in history forever. We had crazy battles, back and forth battles. We had drama all the way to the very end. We had so many of those battles coming down to the very last deadlifts. So many lifters getting close. It was just a crazy week of powerlifting. And initially I was gonna say that this was the best national meet we had seen since 2023 Raw Nationals, which was back when USAPL was kind of like the main one. Or a lot of the top lifters were in USAPL, which thankfully that Fed has disintegrated now, thank God. But yeah, so back then we saw, obviously, we had Daniel Clemens' crazy 745, we had Austin Perkins' crazy 851, that's where Rondel put up his 1045. So that was, the greatest nationals meet previously. And I was going to have this first takeaway be, this is the best nationals ever. Then I thought, well, it's just the best meet ever. Like, what really would eclipse this? I mean, yeah, we've had the last couple of world championships have been epic. The Sheffields are obviously always amazing. But like I said, in terms of all these things that we saw this week, for me, the GOAT powerlifting meet, it was just that good. And I'm glad I made those 2 other videos, because this would have been way too long to try and condense everything down into just one. It would not have done it justice. So go check those out if you haven't already. Okay, into my specific lifter takeaways. So number 1 is in the 66s, which I haven't covered yet. Austin Nikolai, I think, needs to move up to the 74s. So Austin Nikolai, for those that don't know or haven't seen my predictions video leading into this, I actually predicted Austin Nikolai was going to win the Battle of the 66s. And he ended up finishing in 3rd place with a 690 kilo total with the lifts that you see there. So he finished in podium in 3rd. But, I mean, you can see number 1, just from being on the podium, he's damn near the tallest guy there, right? Way taller than Jonathan Garcia, taller than Avery Jackson, which we'll get to those 2 guys in a sec as well. But he's super tall. He's young as well. He's only 21 years old. He's been powerlifting for 5-6 years now, and he's been in the 66 kilo class since the age of 20. Sorry, not, what am I saying, 20? Since the age of 16. He's just over 20 years old now. So from the age of 16, he's been in the 66s, and for 5 years he's gotten stronger, obviously built muscle, still in the same class, and from what I've heard, his weight cut is getting, not out of hand, but it's getting pretty significant. And he's been totaling, in the high 600s since pretty much 2023. So as a young lifter, he should be making pretty crazy progress in these years, and I think that he's sort of holding himself back with that weight cut. So I think that's the next move for him, go up to the 74s. Obviously, it's going to be, you got the big Austin Perkins in that weight class to contend with, but still, for his long-term development, I think that's where you should go. And also, we have seen a young, promising American lifter who was in a low weight class for a long time finally move up and do something pretty incredible, and that's Joe Borenstein. He was a 74 for a while, moved up, and now look where he is as an 83. Not saying Austin Nikolai can do the same thing, but something for his team to think about, I guess. Okay, on to number 3. Jonathan Garcia, mission failed successfully. So what I mean by this, I don't mean to say that he failed. He, took an upset defeat. People thought it was definitely the favorite coming in, and he ended up losing. So he came 2nd place behind Avery Jackson. However, by all other accounts, this was a great day for Jonathan Garcia. In fact, he pretty much won on every level, aside from the fact that he actually didn't win. I'll explain what I mean, but there are his lifts there, including this American record 185.5 bench, which moved very well. Obviously, he had his monster 600 squat, and 260 deadlift is about top of the range for him before his grip starts getting all funky. But he PB'd his total by half a kilo, so he hit 718, and he went 9 for 9, got all his lifts in. And the reason why I say successfully is because honestly, it wasn't that big of a deal that he didn't win, because he probably wasn't going to do Worlds anyway. He's qualified for World Games on account of finishing second at previous year's Worlds, and he's definitely going to want to do World Games. He probably wouldn't have done both anyway. This just solidifies that he's not going to do Worlds. And, you know, good on Avery Jackson for winning and earning that spot. But really, Jonathan Garcia had a fantastic day, added kilos to his total, added kilos to his lifts, went 9 for 9, did everything right, and was only beaten by someone who performed absolutely amazing, which you can't do anything but tip your hat to that guy, right? So yeah, not a huge defeat for Jonathan Garcia, all things considered. But speaking of the man, Avery Jackson pulls off one of the biggest upsets, definitely upset of the year so far, one of the biggest upsets we've seen. He surprised everybody, including myself. I am going to be the first man to say that, you know what, I was discounting Avery Jackson. In my predictions video, I was focusing on the two Garcias, Morgan Aquino Garcia, Jonathan Garcia, and Austin Nikolai. I didn't even mention Avery Jackson. I saw he was nominated in 4th. I took a look at him. I saw that it was a USA Pure lifter coming across. I was like, okay, you know, high 6s, maybe 700 on his best day. I was not expecting him to go 720 and beat Jonathan Garcia. So those were his lifts there. Here is his final deadlift for the win, 297.5. This was crazy to watch. And this was the first day of the championships before the 83s, before the 93s. And the fact that this day was epic in its own way, again, just goes to prove my first point. This was the greatest powerlifting meet we've ever seen. But yeah, Avery Jackson, a new 66 contender, has emerged, which is very exciting given how Shell created such a gap at Sheffield. It's refreshing to have a new contender rise up like that. And I will say, it looks like he had more left in him than the 720. 720 is the third highest total we've ever seen as a 66, behind Kyoto's 725 and obviously Shell. And Avery Jackson will be going to Worlds, and he will presumably be Shell's biggest competitor. I know, well, I don't even know actually if guys like Pana and Kyoto are going to be doing Worlds, given World Games is on the horizon. But it will definitely be Shell's biggest competitor there. He's got a huge squat. His bench looks like he had plenty more kilos left, and he has got that big deadlift. So it's going to be interesting to see with Shell. Obviously, Shell is still 50 kilos ahead comparing the best totals. So let's not get too far out of ourselves here, but still a fresh competitor in the 66s for Shell is exciting. And yeah, he proved us all wrong for discounting him. And, you know, hats off. He had a great day, 9 for 9. And he definitely deserves the win. Angelo Fortino's bench woes continue. So I've obviously talked about the 83 separately. I didn't specifically talk about Ange Fortino, so I figured I would mention him here. So he had, going into this, his prep was red hot. He was hitting 850s, 860s totals in the gym. He opened his day with his crazy 320 squat, which moved... my bad, I gave you a spoiler alert of the previous, of what my next takeaway is going to be, Sean Noriega. But yeah, he had a crazy 320 squat, which we'll look at again. It is worth looking at again. How's that crazy tempo? Cannot imagine doing a tempo squat like that. A 165 bench, and this is where it unraveled. This is 165 was his opener, and then he took a 10 kilo jump and missed it twice, and it looked like strength misses, which was unfortunate because in training, it had looked like he had made some decent gains on his bench and was well in the 170s and closing in on that 400-pound bench. He had a very easy 350 deadlift on his second, and then of course attempted over 800 pounds on his third to pull into 4th place. Couldn't quite, well, he lifted it, had some up down though, and finished in 5th place instead of 4th that his last deadlift would have given him. But yeah, the thing with Angelo, it's always been the case, his squat and deadlift are absolutely world class, and that's even more the case now that he came very close to an 800 plus pound deadlift and he squatted over 700 pounds. He just needs to figure out his bench press. He cannot be benching in the mid 300 pounds against the best 83s in the country and in the world. Literally all his other competitors were benching 200 plus. So the fact that it was giving up 35 kilos or more on bench press was just, it's too much to be giving up at that level. So fortunately his bench woes continue, and if he wants to, get that world team spot, which I know is his goal, he needs to figure out how to get that bench moving. Okay, 6 points. Sean Noriega proves the doubters wrong. So Sean finished just off podium, 857.5. However, he did pull for the podium, and similar to Fortino, he pretty much got it. He just lost grip and obviously got red lighted for it. But that would have given him 870 and pushed Delaney off podium. But going into this, the narrative around Sean Noriega was his lifts are always a little bit borderline, shall we say. His bench, obviously with the elbow depth, his deadlift is always seemingly teetering on the edge of up-down motion at lockout, especially when he gets maximal. Obviously his grip gave out on that one. But yeah, going in, I thought that, Sean Noriega's 850 that he hit previously, that was going to be his top end. And on a good day, he would go 850 at Nationals. He proved me wrong. He added 7.5 kilos to that. All his lifts looked amazing. He went 8 for 9, missing only that last deadlift, and that wasn't even a strength miss. So Sean Noriega is very much back in the mix as one of the top 83s. Pushing that 870 plus mark. I can very easily see him go 870 plus in his next performance if he brings it all together. So yet another American 83 joins the top tier of guys. Number 7, Taylor will win Worlds again. Here's my hot take based on Taylor Atwood's performance. Again, I'm not going to delve too deep into this because I, talked about him at length in the my 83s recap video that I did. But my takeaway from here is Taylor is, number 1, he's going to make it back to Worlds. There are his lifts while I talk in the background, but I think he'll make it back to Worlds at one point eventually, and he is going to win Worlds. He's got another world title in him. The GOAT is not done yet. So obviously the challenge for him will be getting to Worlds, because presumably he would have to beat Joe Borenstein. I think this performance made it clear that he is in fact the second strongest 83 in the world behind Joe Borenstein. 876 with a huge jump on his third to get 901. I think his top end was around 890-ish on the day, which is also what he seemed to think, and I agree with that. I don't think any other 83's top end is 890 as of now. Potentially maybe Russ, but he's not staying 83 for, well, he's got one more meet left, right? But yeah, I think Taylor, he is Joe's closest competitor. He's still getting stronger. He's still filling out the weight class. It wasn't an ideal prep. It's not inconceivable at all to me that Taylor goes 900 plus. And I mean, Joey B's still going to get stronger as well for sure, but you never know. There could be a year where Joey B doesn't go for whatever reason. We always see mix-ups, shake-ups happening. I think Taylor Atwood will find his way onto a Worlds team, and honestly, if he gets to Worlds, you can put him on in it, he's going to win. I will back him to beat any 83 in the world apart from Joey B right now. So yeah, there's my hot take for Taylor Atwood. So good to see the GOAT back at, well, in top form, really. The strongest we've ever seen him. Number 8. So, look, I've talked about Joey B and Jonathan Kaiko and how crazy their performances were and how they won the 83s and 93s. So I'm not going to repeat myself here, but instead I'm going to talk about 2 milestones that I didn't mention previously that we're very close to getting here with these 2 lifters. So Joey B obviously totaled 900. I'll let his lifts play in the background while I speak to this. But, 900 obviously is a huge milestone. However, he's also close to the milestone of the heaviest ever 11 times bodyweight total. So that at the moment, the heaviest 11 times bodyweight total was done by 74s, right? So any 74 is totaled 814 plus, which is pretty much only Taylor, Perk, and Shell. And, well, I guess technically Joey B himself, he did 820 as a 75. I don't think, well, depending on what exactly he weighed, I don't know if that was 11 times bodyweight total, depending on what 74 point something that he was. But no 83 has totaled 11 times bodyweight. Joey B is 13 kilos away from doing that. 913 kilos would be 11 times body weight. And I think we're going to see that soon. He's 900. I'm not going to say 900 was easy for him. I think potential a bit more in the squat and the bench he had in him on that day. I don't think he had too much more on the deadlift. But with how rapid his progression has been, even to just this 900, it is absolutely within the realm of possibility that by the end of the year, he is 913 plus. Now, he's probably not going to have a need to do that, given that at Worlds, he's probably not going to want to push that total up any more than he needs to. Although that's a dangerous game, because that's what we said about Russ last year, and we all know how that story ended. But yeah, I think 913 is absolutely going to happen at some point, and Joe Borenstein is going to become the heaviest ever person to total 11 times body weight, which is huge. It wasn't that long ago when Taylor did that in 2021, there wasn't even a 66 that had gone 11 times body weight yet, and Taylor did it as a 74. That was the significance of his crazy total back in 2021. But yeah, now that Joe B is doing it a weight class above, or close to doing it, is crazy. And keeping with the milestones, Jonathan Kaiko, obviously I've talked about, his numbers and his total, and how the GOAT of battles has returned and won yet another battle to add to his already credential resume. So you'll see his lifts there, but he's close to the heaviest ever 10 times bodyweight total. So we've seen obviously a number of 10 times bodyweight totals from the 83s now with 830 plus. There are quite a long, over 10 lifters now who have hit 830. And funnily enough, 830 seems to be the bare minimum you have to be hitting nowadays to be considered a top level 83, which is crazy. But we've never seen a 93 go 10 times bodyweight. Like I said, it wasn't that long ago, like literally half a year roughly since Gavin Aiden first crossed in the 900s. Obviously, Justin Norris did 914 back in the day amid controversial circumstances that I've talked about before. But yeah, we've never seen any 93 go close to 930, which would be 10 times body weight. Kaiko was 10.5 kilos away, and you could see with his lifts that just played there, he had quite a bit more left on each lift. Well, squat was a bit tough, but definitely more on the bench, definitely more on the deadlift. Again, he's not necessarily going to want to do this if he doesn't need it, although in the international 93s, he could well need a 930 based on how strong Gustav and Emil looked at Sheffield. So I wouldn't be surprised if he needs a 930 to win at Worlds. I think he'll have it in the tank. It'll be close between him and Gustav and Emil, who's going to get there first. But yeah, I think we're going to see a 10 times bodyweight, the heaviest ever 10 times bodyweight total done this year or next year at Sheffield at the very latest. And similar with 11 times bodyweight total from Joey B. So pretty significant milestones there for the people that like bodyweight multipliers. I know a lot of people do. Okay, number 9. The top 3 93s were all separated by inches. It was as close as advertised. Obviously going in Jonathan Kaiko, Gavin Aiden, Brandon Petrie. Gavin Aiden had a solid day until he missed his final deadlift, which he went all in on. Would have given him 921.5, and this is how close he got to it. Literally locked it out, and he slipped from his fingertips. Not even separated by inches, separated by milliseconds. If he had held on to that for a bit more, controlled it down, got the down command, he probably would have got a good lift for that. That's how close he was. And it was crazy how on point the consensus was that the top 3 was going to be, anyone's game. Kaiko was probably a slight favorite, and rightfully so. But yeah, the top 3 93s on any given day, any one of them could be the strongest 93. Similar to Brandon Petrie, who totaled 902.5, finishing second. Again, I've talked about all this in my 93s video, so don't want to repeat myself here, but that is how close he came to locking out his final deadlift, which would have given him 919.5 and the win on bodyweight over Kaiko. And yeah, you can see his hand opening up there. He got stuck right before lockout, literally an inch or so right before lockout. So pretty crazy how close together the top 3 93s are to one another, and how insane it is only one of them can go to Worlds, which I would have a point about that coming up soon. But before that, number 10, the second tier of US 93s are now in the 900s. Now by second tier, I don't mean that in any derogatory sense. I mean, you have those top 3 who, like I said, are all right around that 920 range now on a good day. Like Gavin and Petrie came so close to around 920. Kaiko totaled pretty much 920, half a kilo below. So their top ends are right around there. Then you have, I guess, a tier below that, you have these crazy strong US 93s who are now in the 900s. Dominic Fuqua finished on podium with 900. Demetrius Smith pulled for the win with, sorry, not for the win, pulled for podium for 902.5 and almost got it. And Brandon Jones was 877.5 and still a junior, getting strong, so he's going to be in the 900s very soon. So it's crazy how we went from no 93s in the 900s, and that barrier finally been broken last year, and now we have not even any of the top 3 American 93s, but the group below that have now entered the 900s. That's how much this weight class has leveled up. Crazy progression we've seen. And that brings me to my next point, which is world selection needs revising. Now, I've made a video on this when I talked about the problem with being American in powerlifting and how so much of in certain weight classes, 83s and 93s mainly, there is a disproportionate amount of talent contained within America, and it's so unfair only one lifter can go from each weight class. I know technically 2 can go, but there's no way the US are going to deny any one weight class the opportunity of being represented, because you can only take a maximum of 8 in your men's team, right? And there are 8 weight classes. Just to illustrate that point, here's an updated list with the relevant Americans there. So you can see, obviously, Emil Gustav in the top 3, but pretty much everyone else, barring Christian Idonkun and Carlos Pearson Griffith, are all American. And in the 83s, it's even worse. Your top 4 are all American, and your 7 of your top 10 are from the US. Only one of those can go to Worlds. Now, I know that people are going to say, oh, it's in the rules, it's not fair if this, that. Look, I know it's in the rules, I know it can't happen, but rules are there to change, right? Sometimes it's not a constitution that can't be changed, okay? You can always change rules. This is one I think needs changing. I think, and I've gotten a bunch of comments about this and I've discussed it with some people in the comments, but I feel like people are in agreement, some people anyway. It just doesn't make sense that you're restricting so many of the world's best athletes from going to the world championships, right? And potential solutions, look, this is just me brainstorming. I haven't, I don't want to get too deep into this because, this could be a subject for all in the video, but proposed solutions maybe is you take the winner of nationals plus anyone else who exceeds the IPF world record unofficially in that weight class. So for example, Taylor Atwood under that criteria would have qualified because he beat Russ's 870.5, even though he didn't win, he beat that mark. I think that would be a fair, a fair criteria. But then you think, oh, well, how does that fit with the maximum of 8 lifters per national team? Well, if a 9th lifter happens to break the IPF world record and doesn't win nationals, then guess what? That country takes 9 lifters. Oh, big deal. End of the world. They've taken more than 8. Who cares? More than 8. Some guy thought of that rule back in the day. It's outdated and restricting the sport. So what, they take 9? So what, they take 10? Why wouldn't you, right? I know this is probably never going to happen, but thinking out loud here. Another potential solution is you take the winner and any of the top 3 who exceeds 95% of the IPF world record. So it's similar to Sheffield, right? We're used to the 95% number being significant nowadays because that's the number you have to hit as a world champion to qualify for Sheffield. So maybe it would make sense if we take that same threshold and we apply it to the pathway from nationals to worlds. I don't know. I'm sure there are a bunch of other, better solutions, and I'm not gonna lie, I came up with these in like the space of 90 seconds. So if there's any glaring problems with this, or if there's, much more obvious better solutions, then by all means let me know. But I do think this needs changing, and the 83s and 93s definitely have showed that this year. Okay, number 12. No one on planet Earth is beating Anthony McNaughton anytime soon. Again, this is one I've talked about in my previous video where I mentioned 93s and 105, so I don't want to delve into this too much. Anthony McNaughton put on a generational performance. I'll let his lifts play in the background here, but he is far and away the strongest 105. And when I say no one's beating him, I don't just mean at Worlds, I potentially also mean Sheffield. I'll show you the Sheffield math that I did after his lifts all play out, but at Worlds, I don't see anyone. I mean, there are a lot of international world-class 105s. Anatoly, obviously, Novopasmeni, still holds the IPF world record, 940.5. You had Coco, who won Euros with 920. You had Regan and Emil, who are looking strong in the low 900s. Honestly, I don't see anyone else, any other 105 going above 950. I think 950 would be the best day Anatoly could put together, potentially 955 or something like that. And I honestly don't think Emil, Coco, or Regan have 950 in them yet. So it is clear that Anthony McNaughton is far above that. 979 with absolute ease. You could see his videos there. He had more in the tank on every single one of them. I know international travel is a thing. It's different. International judging, yada yada. We've heard that a million times before. Sure, I agree. But man, 979 with room in the tank is a big difference to, 940 all out at Worlds. I think so anyway. That's a 40 kilo gap he has over anyone else. So yeah, needless to say, heavy Worlds favorite, he will win Worlds pretty convincingly. He's also potentially the Sheffield favorite. Here's my Sheffield math that I did. So the IPF world record in the 105 is obviously 940.5 by Anatoly that I just mentioned. 979 would be 104 point, pretty much 0.1% over that world record. Now, if you do the math, if you take that percentage and apply it to, I guess, the other weight class where we see a potential Sheffield favorite being Joe Borenstein, because his 900 was so far above 870.5. If you do 104.9% of the IPF 83 world record, you get 906, which is 6 kilos above what Joe Borenstein did. Now, number one, Joe Borenstein's 900 looked harder than Anthony McNaughton's 979. And number two, in order for Joe Borenstein to win Worlds, I think it's far more likely he is going to have to push the IPF world record higher than Anthony McNaughton will have to push his higher. I think with Ade, held Durans, I think they all have the potential to go above 870, particularly Ade, with how strong he looked and how easy his 840 at Euros was. I think Ade has the potential to go above 870, especially because Ade is probably one of the only people in the world who can pull after Joey B. Well, him and Enaharo. Although I don't think Enaharo is quite at that 870 level yet. He's probably going to load up 1,000 pounds to try and get there, though, for the win at Worlds, who knows. But yeah, I think Joe B is going to have to put at least a couple kilos on that 870. I don't think he's necessarily going to want to pace himself for a 900 at Worlds. But you can't play the game of trying to keep it too low because you might get caught sleeping like Ross did with Durans. He's not going to want to repeat of that. Whereas Anthony McNaughton, I think, being the biggest puller, or definitely a far bigger puller than Anatoly, who is, I guess, the only real competitor who would go in the 950s, I think, he has the advantage where he doesn't need to push the world record any further. He can just load what he needs based on where Anatoly is pacing for the day, because he knows Anatoly is not going to have this miracle deadlift that he can pull out the win with. So based on that, Anthony McNaughton looks to be the favorite, and every other weight class, there isn't someone who's so far ahead of the IPF world record. I mean, Jonathan Kaiko was 2 kilos ahead of the IPF world record, but if you do 104% above 917.5, it's like 950 something. There's no way a 93 is going to do that anytime soon. And Rondel, unless he gets a wild card to Sheffield, which I hope he does, he's, there's no one going to be breaking the 120 world record either, because Bob's not going. So yeah, when I say no one beats Anthony McNaughton, I'm talking not just Worlds, but pretty much also Sheffield, with how it currently looks. Obviously, a lot can change between now and Sheffield, but the early odds are Anthony McNaughton. I'm putting him as a favorite already. Number 13, Mike Tuchscherer is eternal, or immortal. Probably would have been a better choice of word there, but for those that don't know, Mike T, let me give you a bit of a background for potentially some newer powerlifting fans who might not be aware. Mike T podiumed at the first 3 IPF Raw Classic Championships. He got 2 second places in 2013 and 14 and a 3rd place in 2012. In fact, he was a powerlifter long before the IPF went Raw in 2012. This is a guy that competed at Raw Nationals back in 2011, or far before that as well. Basically, he's been around longer than the sport of Raw tested powerlifting has, right? That's how much of an OG he is. He was also a former world record holder. In fact, he was a former IPF and overall 120 kilo total world record holder. 916.5 is his best ever total in the 120s, or 2,021 pounds. He held that world record for quite a long time. So he set it initially in 2012, right when the sport started. Essentially, he had the first 120 total world record recognized by the IPF. Now, he lost that to Mohamed Bouafia in like 2013 and 14, but that record was annulled due to doping violations. So technically that record stood until Dennis Cornelius broke it in 2016, 4 years, hence the 1464 days. He also held individual lift world records in the squat and the deadlift in the 120 kilo class, with a 325 squat and a 371.5 deadlift, which were world records, again, technically from 2012 to 2016 until they were broken because Mohamed Bouafia's records were annulled. The overall world records he only held for like a month though, because some other Russian lifters broke it in 2012, not internationally, so not IPF recognized. But there you go. Basically, this man has held world records in the squat, deadlift, and total in his weight class. He's podiumed at 3 world championships. He's been around for longer than the sport has. And, oh, by the way, he was also the inventor of something you may have heard about, a little thing called RPE. You know, that thing that if you've done any sort of powerlifting training in your life, this is what you would have used? Yeah, that's Mike T's creation. Now, I say creation, I think it was around obviously in sports. I think he took it from, well, the story goes that I've heard anyway, he took it from endurance athletes, I believe. They were using like a rate of perceived effort style system, and he adapted that to the strength sporting world. I'm not sure whether it was around in Olympic weightlifting or other strength sports before then, but yeah, Mike T is basically responsible for your powerlifting programs today. And RPE is so prevalent today that there is not a single world-class elite level powerlifter that I know of who does not use RPE. I'm pretty sure every single one of them use RPE, and they have this man to thank for that. This guy is the godfather of powerlifting. Why do I bring him up? Well, he placed 3rd in the 120s this year. This is crazy. I'm thinking with how many great performances we had, and all the other storylines and whatnot from the championships, this is going to get forgotten and underrated to no end. No one's going to talk about this because everyone's going to focus on what Joey B did, Taylor's comeback, what Kaiko did, Avery's upset, what Anthony McNaughton did, Rondel coming back, Ray looking strong, all this stuff. All amazing things to focus on. But the fact that Mike T, at 39 years old and a full well over 10 years after he's put up his best ever numbers in total, is still putting up close to his best ever numbers in total. Before I said his world record deadlift was 371.5, here he is deadlifting 365 to give him a 902.5 kilo total and a 3rd place finish, a podium finish in the 120 weight class. And talk about perfect attempt selection. That was insane. 902.5 he totaled. I think that's only like, well, I had what his best ever total was, 912.5, right? Something around that range. So only like 10 kilos off his best ever total. And he missed his 3rd bench, the only lift of the day that he missed. I think it was a 7.5 kilo jump, I want to say, 5 or 7.5. And he lifted it. It was a crazy grinder like his deadlift. His elbows got stuck and he eventually locked it out, but I think he got caught for up-down motion, 2-1, no lift. If he would have got that, he would have totaled 910, which is only a couple kilos off his best ever. And for a guy that set his world records back in 2014, well over a decade ago, the fact that he's still within a few kilos off those numbers at almost 40 years old and still podiuming at Open US Raw Nationals is absolutely insane and an inspiration to everyone. So hats off to Mike T. you're not going to get the respect you deserve for this because so many amazing things happen in these championships, but I wanted to make sure I give him the respect he deserves for this. And number 14 in the 120 still, and an 80% Rondel is still far and away the strongest 120. That's my takeaway from this. A Rondel that can cruise and come in with not the best training, not in the best form, can still wipe the floor with every single 120 in the world with ease. So these were his lifts: 375 squat, 260 bench, 375 dead. So he totaled just over, 1,010 kilos. And we all knew coming into this, he had a crazy training block where he put up a PB bench and deadlifted a crazy 425, which obviously took quite a bit out of him, understandably so. And he then got the call up, I think it was only about a month out, to compete here to go against Bob, who ended up dropping off, ironically. He agreed to it, but he openly said he wasn't expecting any crazy numbers. So he ended up attempting this 412.5 to unofficially break the IPF world record deadlift, which would have given him, I believe, 1047.5, so just slightly more than his best ever total. But he got it above, or just around to his knees and no further, and he settled with 1,010. So not a PB for him, far from his best day. I think he had more in his squat, more in his bench, and likely would have had a 400 even had he wanted to load a 400 on that day, which still would have been a competition PB for him. But why not load that? I mean, respect for doing it, respect for showing up and competing. Anytime we get to see Rondel competing is a treat, because Rondel has been robbed of so many years of his competitive prime. It is an absolute travesty, and it's been talked about before. I've made videos on him and the whole story behind why he was banned from competing for so long. So if you're interested in the details, I'll leave a link to that. But it is always a treat to see arguably the strongest powerlifter ever do his thing. I'm talking like relative terms. And it is clear that he does not need to be anywhere near his best to be the strongest guy in the room as a 120. I really hope that Sheffield give him a wild card, because we're not going to see him at Worlds this year yet. We have to wait till next year to see him at Worlds. So hopefully Sheffield can do us a solid there, or at least NAPFs or something. Get this guy to an international meet, because the fact that the 120 world record is still 978.5 when Rondel has been totaling 1,000 plus for like 2 to 3 years now is just ridiculous. Okay, number 15, Ray Williams is still the second strongest 120 plus in the world. So my prediction going into this was that Ray was going to be his best ever version that we've seen since his prime in 2019-ish. And I was correct. He squatted 460, made it move with shocking speed, and benched 225 and deadlifted 375, which, we've seen him squat big numbers in the gym and in his last few competitions over 1,000. His bench has been around that, 500-ish pound mark, but his deadlift is what, was way better at this meet. 375 is the most he's pulled in a long time. 1,060 is the most that he's totaled since back in 2019 when he was still a world champ and still in the 1100s. So it's great to see him back in the mid thousands as opposed to low thousands, and getting toward, closer to 1,100 than 1,000. He's still the second strongest 120 plus. I mean, obviously Jesus is still, pretty far ahead, but who the hell knows what Tima is at these days, or what weight class he's going to settle in between the 120 and 120 pluses. But either way, it doesn't look like his strength is where it once was in the high thousands. And, that Ukrainian lifter that won Euros was in the, what was he, like around 1,000-ish range, or high 900s. And Chen Kochek around 1,000. Basically, Ray is the second strongest 120 plus. So there you go. The fact that he's still there, another OG similar to Mike T, is, very inspiring to see. And the fact he's getting stronger and getting back to his prime year by year is wild. We might even see Ray go back in the 1100s one day. Who knows? I mean, I think his bench and his squat were pretty easy in this, so he had a few more kilos definitely left. That deadlift was a bit harder, but still, you know, only about 20 or so kilos off his best ever deadlift, or 25. Very impressive from Ray. And one of the themes from this competition, very, very good to see some of the old heads, if you will, come back and do very well. Guys like Taylor, I guess Kaiko, if you can call him that, because he took a year off. Mike T, Ray, right? These returning legends all doing very, very well. You'd love to see it. Okay, on to the women. I haven't talked about the women much. This was always going to be a meet that was going to be dominated by the men's weight classes, because that's where, you know, we saw the crazy stacks of talent. I mentioned in my predictions video that in the women's weight classes, pretty much every weight division had a clear-cut favorite, and pretty much all of them ended up winning, just like I predicted, right? With a few exceptions. So in the 47s and 52s, Jess Espinal, for whatever reason, I'm not exactly sure why I wasn't competing. So Heather Connor got the win with a massive deadlift. That'll actually be interesting to see her versus Tiff at Worlds. In the 52s, I think Megan Holbert didn't make weight or something like that. So Serene Gaynor Metzinger, sorry, I couldn't read my writing. Ended up winning 52s. And in this battle of the 69s, we had Celine Crum, which I was picking Gabby Martinez for that. It was close. That was definitely the best battle we saw on the women's side. So Celine Crum coming out on top. Then, of course, in the weight classes, you had Natalie Richards, you had Crane Warford, you had Bonica Brown do their thing. The highlights for me, though, were definitely Meg Scanlon and Amanda Lawrence. So Meg Scanlon put up a crazy 566 total, which was unofficially above her world record. So she gets redemption from her Sheffield performance where she couldn't quite break the world record. Those were her lifts there. Monster 143 bench, which you'll see coming up just now. But the reason why I really like this, apart from the fact that it was just an insane performance, is Megan and Amanda didn't even have to be here. They were at Sheffield. They put up good totals that realistically weren't going to get touched at PNRT, and they could have just done what some of the guys, what, you know, Perk did, what Jesus did, where you just take your Sheffield total and you use that to qualify for Worlds, don't worry about Nationals. Could have easily done that. But the fact that they came and they still showed up, and not only did they show up, they showed up and they pushed themselves and they put up a crazy performance. Like I said, Meg Scanlon unofficially broke a world record. Amanda Lawrence went to unofficially break her world record and got close, well, you know, not super close on a final deadlift, but she pulled for it and got it off the ground. So, mad respect for that. And I think that Megan and Amanda are setting the example, and I want to see more of the male lifters do this as well. Because, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right that you can skip Nationals and make Worlds. I mean, I understand why they do it because of the timing, and, you know, it's asking a bit much of the athletes to have them perform at their best for Sheffield, but then also have to be back at their best at Nats so they can qualify for Worlds. Pretty short turnaround, I get that. It makes sense. But I think with the fact they're moving Sheffield next year, I think is the weird year. We're going to have 2 Sheffields, but from then on, we're going to have Sheffield at the end of the year in November-ish time. I think that makes more sense. You know, a bit shorter time between Worlds and Sheffield, but still enough to, you know, make progress and get some good training blocks in. And then there's enough break between Sheffield and Nationals where I think they should just make it that if you want to go to Worlds, you're going to win Nationals. Simple, right? I think that that is a good way to do it. And I like that Meg Scanlon and Amanda Lawrence just decide to show up to Nationals despite not needing to and put up crazy performances just for the sake of wanting to win a national title and showing up for the audience. I think that that's a great move, and going forward, hopefully more of the men do that as well. So yeah, Amanda Lawrence went 635, had a solid day, PB bench, which is always good to add kilos to, and she attempted a big deadlift to unofficially break her world record, but couldn't quite get it on the day. But a 635 total is still very competitive, obviously. Well, still the best 84 kilo total there is. And like I said, similar to Meg Scanlon, she didn't need to do this, but she came and did because, you know, she won a national title and she just wanted to show that she could. So, mad respect. However, my final takeaway, speaking of Amanda, I just don't see her keeping up with Agata. I just don't. So, Obviously, this is in reference to the rivalry between Amanda Lawrence and Agata Shitko. Agata Shitko, who is terrorizing those middleweight classes in women's powerlifting, in the 69s and the 76s, even talking maybe going down to 63s. She's far and away the best lifter in the 69s and 76s. She could win either weight class pretty well. In 76s, you have Carlina, who's not that far off. But in 69s, she's far and away the best, right? And her total is getting closer and closer to Amanda. In fact, I believe Agata's best ever total now is 635 that she did as a light 76. And when I say light 76, I mean she was like 70, 71, 72. So she's at that body weight, she's already hitting 635, which is the same number Amanda Lawrence hit at this Nationals. And she wasn't taking it easy by any stretch of the imagination. Obviously she could have paced a bit differently and not taken that big of a jump on a deadlift. So she's still very much in the 640s, but her total hasn't moved much in the last few years. Agata's definitely has. And I just don't see that Amanda can hold off Agata for long. I think when Agata decides to bulk up to 76.1 to face off against Amanda, at this point, I think she's the favorite, which is absolutely crazy to say against Amanda Lawrence, who's not only the 84 GOAT, but arguably the GOAT of women's powerlifting overall. And the fact that he's Agata Shitko, who's 2 weight classes below, putting up very similar numbers, is wild. And I'm calling it. I think Agata Shitko is going to beat Amanda Lawrence. I think Amanda Lawrence, that's part of the reason she competed, and now to try and send a message to say, hey, I can still beat my numbers. And that's why she loaded up to beat her world record unofficially. Just unfortunately couldn't quite get there. I think, yeah, it's going to be a crazy battle when we do see it, which who knows when that's going to happen, because I think Agata's been talking about dropping to 63s as well in the meantime, which very much contradicts moving up to 84s. But when it does happen in the next few years, hopefully, I think Agata is going to be the woman to beat, or the favorite in that showdown. But there you have it. There's a wrap up for PNAS 2025. This will be my final video that I make on it. I made quite a few. I'm going to go back to some of my other usual video styles after this. But yeah, I hope that you guys enjoyed this last week of powerlifting as much as I did, because that was the greatest meet we have ever seen.